Humans, from a purely physical standpoint, are not very impressive. We are not the strongest, fastest, or largest animals. Our infants are born completely helpless and remain dependent for an incredibly long time, which is a huge evolutionary liability. We lack natural armor, fangs, or claws for defense. The central question is, how did this vulnerable, slow-maturing primate come to thrive and shape the entire planet? The answer isn't in our muscles, but in our minds, and most importantly, in our hearts. Our superpower is cooperation, made possible by the ancient love genes, oxytocin and vasopressin. Now I'd like to ask for your grace and forbearance as I take you on a brief journey into the fascinating science of our social nature. Let me start by explaining the deep history of our neurobiology rooted in the human genome. The human oxytocin and vasopressin genes are not new. They date back hundreds of millions of years to the history of God's created reality. They are variations of a single ancient hormone called vasotocin, which is found in animals like fish and reptiles. For about 500 million years, vasotocin has helped regulate social behaviors, allowing the species that came before us to mold, shape, and populate the planet. And then came the evolutionary miracle that laid the groundwork for humankind. In the mammalian line, a gene duplication event occurred. The new DNA resulted in two distinct versions of the ancestral gene, which evolved into oxytocin and vasopressin. I like to think of this as God refining the software for supporting a new being, which would compensate for our vulnerability on an otherwise hostile planet. And so let's take a closer look at what we now know are the most human genes, the very essence of God's created reality that Jesus honored and commanded us to respect, and the Holy Spirit uses to mold us today. What is oxytocin? Often called the cuddle hormone or the tend and befriend hormone. It surges during childbirth and breastfeeding, forging an intense primal bond between mother and child. It also plays a key role in building trust, empathy, and romantic pair bonding. It's the neurochemical glue of our closest relationships. What is vasopressin? This molecule is closely related and works in concert with oxytocin. It's linked to behaviors like mate protection, paternal care, and social recognition. It helps us distinguish us from them and strengthens our loyalty to our in-group. Together, these genes form the physiological architecture for love and belonging. For me, as a scientist who honors and respects the Old Testament, yet struggles to reconcile it with my modern understanding, the cleaving of the vasotocin gene into the separate but complementary vasopressin and oxytocin genes reminds me of Genesis 2 and the creation of Eve. Over millions of years, evolution has enhanced the human brain's sensitivity to these molecules. This genetic inheritance is what made our complex social lives possible, allowing us to care for our helpless young, form stable families, and cooperate in large groups. We survived not by being the toughest individuals, but by being the most loving and cooperative species. I see evolution as the method God used to create a creature capable of love and relationships. It's an integrated view that sees God's handiwork in the very fabric of our biology. It doesn't discard Genesis. It fulfills its deeper meaning. One of the New Testament references that has been quite helpful to me is Hebrews 3 verses 1 through 6, which argues for the superiority of Jesus' new covenant over the old covenant of Moses. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters, who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's house, bearing witness to what would be spoken by God in the future. But Christ is faithful as the Son over God's house. And we are his house, if indeed we hold firmly to our confidence and the hope in which we glory. And so this brings us back to Jesus' primary commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then in John chapter 15, he takes it to the next level. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea, it's the very thing our biology has been shaped for. The history of evolution is the story of God preparing a creature who has the innate capacity to fulfill that commandment. Evolution, from this perspective, is not a godless, random process. It is the breathtakingly elegant and patient means by which the Creator shaped a creature who could, through its very neurochemistry, experience love, empathy, and connection, thereby becoming capable of knowing and loving both God and neighbor. Our genes don't just tell the story of our survival, they tell the story of how we were created for love and cooperation.